Hi, my name is Paul Vanderclay. I'm the pastor of Livingstone's Christian Reformed Church in Florin Road in Sacramento, and I blog at leadingchurch.com. You can find my sermons at the Livingstone's website too, and I wanted to do a series of videos on Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson has been fascinating me over the last few months as I've been watching his Psychological Significance of the Bible series. I've made it through his Maps of Meaning 2017 course and his Personalities course, and I've caught a bunch of his other videos. While Peterson gets a lot of attention for the political stuff, I'm most interested in the Bible stuff. As you can see behind me, I do a lot of work in the Bible. My father was a minister, my grandfather was a minister, and then if you go back through my Jewish ancestry, there are a lot of rabbis and butchers, it seemed, way back in the day. So I've lived within the context of the Bible. I think the Bible is a fandom. It's a story that invites us to live within it. And so I was very interested in Jordan Peterson's videos, and I want to discuss them. And I've blogged for quite a while, and so when I was thinking about discussing them, I thought, well, I could write blog posts on them and embed YouTubes of them. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that this entire phenomenon of Jordan Peterson is a YouTube phenomenon. In the 80s, I read Neil Postman's Amusing Ourselves to Death, and I'm rereading it now, along with his other book on technology. And Postman, I think, makes the point very persuasively that mediums change message. The medium is the message. And so what does it mean that Jordan Peterson is using YouTube? And how and why is this important? I suspect that we might be seeing a revival of sorts. Probably has very little to do with the kind of revival that has tent meetings and sawdust and the kinds of things on the American frontier that tent meetings are supposed to go back to. But often when we have a new technology or a new medium, we find God working through those new mediums. And I think Jordan Peterson is making some important contributions. He's trying to heal some things in Western civilization and in the Western church that have been outstanding for 200 or 300 years. And I'll get into a lot more of that as I go through the videos. When I was thinking about how I wanted to engage Jordan Peterson's videos, I thought probably the best way to do it is on YouTube. Now, how do I do this? I'm still figuring this out. And I know I post Jordan Peterson videos on my Facebook page and on my blog, but I'm also not under any misunderstanding that most of my friends are not going to sit through 2.5 hours of listening to this man ramble, which is something that I do, and obviously something that a lot of people do. And so I thought what I'd do with these videos is play parts of Jordan Peterson videos and then comment on them. Now, again, I'm going to begin with the introduction to the idea of God, his first videos. At this point, right now in early December of 2017, he has more than 1 million hits on this video. And I want to talk about it a little bit. I think that in some ways, his video, this is the beginning of his video, is kind of a prolegomena. When you go to when I went to Calvin Seminary in Grand Rapids, when you go to seminary and you study systematic theology, you begin with prolegomena, and prolegomena is kind of the study of first things, and it's the study of how we know things. Often in systematic theology, it talks about the Bible as our source of knowledge. And when Jordan Peterson is talking about the psychological significance of the Bible, I think he, especially in this first video, is doing some prolegomena. Now, this first video, I'm probably only going to touch on the first 3.5 minutes of the video. And like I said, it's almost a 3-hour-long video. I won't cover everything in the video, obviously, but the introduction is important, so I wanna get there and start there. So as I work out my hotkeys, let's listen to some of the video. Obviously, here's the title slide, May 16, 2017, at a lecture hall in Toronto.
All very much for coming. It's really shocking to me that you don't have anything better to do on a Tuesday.
And that point he makes right there seems like a small thing, but to me as a pastor is a huge thing. I know for a fact I have friends who minister churches in Toronto. John Sook was a prominent CRC pastor until he left the denomination and now pastors a liberal church in Toronto. Phil Reinders, who I went all the way through college and seminary with, and with Greek and Hebrew, and I know and love Phil. He's pastoring a church in Toronto. Others I know pastor a church in Toronto, and I'm sure these churches have empty seats and empty pews, and every Sunday they're talking about the Bible, and here this guy comes along and he sells out what is a significantly sized concert hall at 20 or 40 bucks a head, and he's talking about the Bible, and he's going on for a long time. Sometimes a preacher, if you preach 25, 30, 45 minutes, people complain, oh, the sermon's long. This guy is going hours, and as you'll see, he's got a fairly rambling style, and he's talking about the psychological significance of the Bible, and he's selling out this hall in Toronto, and hundreds of thousands of hits on YouTube. He's got over 500,000 subscribers to his YouTube channel, and he gets over $50,000 a month on Patreon. Now, some of you might not know a lot about YouTube subscribers and Patreon, but this is a really huge deal. And this, again, makes me ask the question, is God doing something through him? Is God doing something in the history of the West? Now, part of what we know about revivals are that there are these huge movements. In the United States, we had the First and Second Great Awakening. In Korea, in the 20th century, there was this enormous movement where many people became Christian. And what strikes me about Jordan Peterson is that many young men especially, many of whom have given up on Christianity, given up on religion, are now giving Christianity and religion and the Bible another look. Now, I know a lot of my pastor friends are watching these videos, and you might have criticisms about particular interpretations and so on, but you shouldn't overlook the significance of these things. So let's keep going, and let's see what Jordan Peterson has to say.
No, seriously though, it is. I mean, you know, it's very strange in some sense that there's so many of you here to listen to a sequence of lectures on the psychological significance of the biblical stories. It isn't something I've wanted to do for a long time, but it still does surprise me that there's a ready audience for it. And well, so that's good. So we'll see how it goes.
Now, right here, you'll see in this first lecture is going to talk about Nietzsche and Hume, and I'm going to save Nietzsche and Hume, hopefully, if I continue doing this. So please let me know if you're enjoying this or finding this worthwhile, because I don't, well, that's not true. I do it for my own reasons, which is, in a sense, why he's doing these series, which he's about to say. But we'll talk about Nietzsche and Jung. I'll probably save that. This first video, I'm mostly going to focus on Prolegomena.
I'll start with this because this is the right question. The right question is why bother doing this? And I don't mean why should I bother doing it. I have my own reasons for doing it, but you might think, well, why bother with this strange old book at all? And that's a good question. You know,
I want to pause right there too. Why bother with this strange old book at all? And that is a real question. Now, I know right now society is kind of tribalized, and so you've got people over here that say, well, the Bible is this old book, it's archaic, it's something that should be dismissed. And then you've got these other people over here who are in religious organizations, and they say things like, the Bible is the Word of God, the Bible is the center of my life. And so when he's dealing with this, in many ways, he's coming from the skeptical community and saying, what is it about this book? What is important about this book? So let's go on.
It's a contradictory document that's been called together over thousands of years. It's outlasted kingdoms, many kingdoms. You know, it's really interesting that it turns out that a book is more durable than stone. It's more durable than a castle. It's more durable than an empire.
Now this is something, the point that I've made often when I'm preaching and teaching. Jesus, what he says here is almost exactly what Jesus says. And Yeah, truly I tell you, I was just in fact preaching on this past Sunday. Truly I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. That obviously in the context of the little apocalypse in Mark 13 is something that's caused a great deal of discussion. But then Jesus goes on to say, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away. What kind of man says this kind of stuff? What kind of man makes these kinds of claims? And you get this in the Sermon of the Mount on the Mount as well. Truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. And you just have to begin to wonder, well, what does this mean? And then if you have the idea that 2,000 years ago, these things were written, and 2,000 years ago, we're still talking about them. That on the surface is something to contend with, and I think this is part of what Peterson is realizing and contending with as he starts this series. So let's keep going.
And that's really interesting, that something in some sense so evanescent can be so long-living. So there's that. That's kind of a mystery. I'm approaching this whole scenario, the biblical stories, as if they're a mystery, fundamentally, because they are. There's a lot we don't understand about them. We don't understand how they came about. We don't really understand how they were put together. We don't understand why they had such an unbelievable impact on civilization.
That's another point that I want to pause at. Because again, that is simply true. People sometimes say to me, why do you read this old book? Why do you believe in this old book? And I would have to say, this book and the life of Jesus Christ have changed the course of human history in ways that most people don't even appreciate. If you live in the West, your culture, your morality, your assumptions have all been shaped by the Bible and Jesus Christ. Now, obviously, there's a group of people that say, well, we're beyond that, we should get past that, and this is exactly where Jordan Peterson comes into the conversation. But what I think is interesting about him is he's not coming into the conversation on the side of, well, I'm a Christian and I want to convince you of this. He's coming in the conversation on the side of a skeptic saying, I've come to wonder about these things. What is it about these things? And in that way, I actually like listening to Jordan Peterson and reading C.S. Lewis kind of in two hands, because Lewis also rejected Christianity when he was young, fought in World War I, and became an Oxford Don, but then began to again and again consider Christianity. And in some ways, I see Peterson on this same path.
We don't understand how people could have believed them. We don't understand what it means that we don't believe them now, or even what it would mean if we did believe them. And then, on top of all that, there's the additional problem, which isn't specific to me, but is certainly relevant to me, that no matter how educated you are,
I want to stop at that belief part, because this will be a very big thing for Jordan Peterson. As you go through the biblical series, as you listen to his other lectures, the transliminal interviews are really important. I'll put links to some of these things below. But Peterson is really wrestling with the question of belief. What does it mean to believe? And now this is no small thing. And I think in many ways the Christian church has done itself a disservice by making belief a seemingly very simple thing. And I think for some people it is. I've known a lot of people who simply believe, and that changes their life, and off they go. And he'll mention too that I think it is Rogers, a psychologist who made the point that a religious conversion is something powerful enough to break addictions, and you see this in 12-step programs. Peterson himself is an expert on addiction. He did a lot of his early work in substance abuse and alcoholism, so he knows something about that, and I think that's probably some of what's behind this as he explores it. Now let's get into the educated part here.
You're not educated enough to discuss the psychological significance of the biblical stories, but I'm going to do my best.
Now that's a really important thing. If you look at all these books behind me, this is only a portion of the books in my study. And often when people walk into my study, they're like, "Oh, you've got a lot of books." And I always feel, well, over the last number of years, pastors like me are more and more getting electronic books and Kindle and Logos and in various different ways. There's no end to learning this, and as we'll continue to see in Peterson, the more he studies the Bible, the more he begins to recognize what's going on. One of the interesting things is that as I listen to him, a lot of the tools he's using to study the Bible, some of them are a little esoteric. He talks about Northrop Frye, but a lot of them are just tools that he finds on the internet. These are 19th century commentaries, and again, I look, I'm not a biblical scholar, as in someone who teaches New Testament or biblical studies in a seminary. I'm a pastor, so I'm a generalist. So I work with people, and I work with the Bible, and I, in many ways, stand on the shoulders of technical biblical scholars. But this is what I'm immersed in, and this guy is a trained psychologist, and he's trying his best to go through the Bible, and then he's going to engage mythology, and obviously we're going to talk about that as we go. So let's keep going.
Partly because I want to learn more about them, and one of the things I've learned is that the best way to learn about something is to talk about it. And when I'm lecturing, I'm thinking, I'm not trying to tell you what I know for sure to be the case, because there's lots of things I don't know for sure to be the case.
So that too, I really connect with. One of the things that I experience, if you go to my church YouTube site, I've started over the last couple of years, recording. That's a member of the church banging in the background, so he's fixing some stuff. But when we talk through things, we learn, and this is, again, I think this is part of the medium of YouTube. This is part of we've always known this about writing. If you write enough, you begin to realize that you don't learn and then you write. You learn while you write. It's the act of putting things into words that words begin to form, and you can begin to put these things together. And so this is what he's talking about here. And again, this is one of the things I appreciate about him, because I think he's just right about that. It's been true to my experience, and so we'll watch him as he goes through this. I think this is close to being done for what we'll talk about now.
I'm trying to make sense out of this, and I have been doing this for a long time. Now, you may know, you may not, that I'm an admirer of Nietzsche.
Okay, I'm going to pause there, and I decided when I set up this video that this would be the end of the first video, and then I will start the second video on Nietzsche. I don't know a lot about Nietzsche, but I've learned a fair amount from Peterson, and if there are Nietzsche scholars out there that want to correct things, I'm more than happy to listen. But what we're going to do, again, in the spirit of Prolegomena, is we're going to ask questions about how do we know what we know? What do we know about human beings? What puts us together? And then as we go from Nietzsche to Jung, we're going to ask questions about where does religious information come from? Where does knowledge come from? What is God? Where does God come from? So this is my Prolegomena of the Prolegomena. This is the first video. Again, hopefully I'll continue making more. If you have a comment, I post these on my Facebook page. I'll post them to Twitter. I'll put them on my blog. Please leave a comment or send me an email, because again, I would love to engage. Or better yet, if you've got some comments, make a YouTube and send me the link. And let's see the ways that this medium will be used by people, and in my opinion, used by God, and we'll see where it leads. So thanks for watching.